Let's talk staffing. I don't know about you, but I know for me that there have been times throughout my history in leading where there were problems, there were challenges, there were dilemmas that I was facing that I just wrestled with deep down inside. Man, I wish I could actually hire somebody to offload different things off my plate so that I could deal with this or get through to that next season. I wish it was always that easy, right? But my guess is whether or not you're in an existing church situation, whether or not you're in a new church, you just started church, you're dreaming about church, there is a real staffing challenge to what you're facing. And so let's take some time. I'm going to give you 10 staffing rules. These rules are kind of bought out over the time of both things I've learned the hard way and moments that I kind of go, I think I got that one right, and things I've learned from seasoned coaches over the years as well. And hopefully these will be beneficial to you as well in your leadership process as you look at building your team and making sure that you actually get the right team in place. So let's begin walking through these rules. Rule number one, I simply said this: you got to pay attention to the big C's. And you might go, what in the world are we talking about when it comes to the big C's? Well, here they are. If you have a piece of paper, I'm going to give you those big C's. First one is competency. Second one is chemistry. Third is character. Fourth is culture. So let's take some time. Let's talk a little bit more detail about how these play. First of all, competency. You want to make sure that somebody can actually do the job, that they have the background, they have the experience, they have the knowledge, but not just knowledge, the wisdom necessary for them to actually lead in this area that you're looking at hiring. So competency is critical. Don't bypass this. Just because they may have an educational plan that they've done or completed doesn't necessarily mean that they're competent for this role. So you want to make sure that their competency pairs up well with what you're actually looking at filling. The second is chemistry. There has to be a likability factor between you as the leader or their direct overseer and they themselves. And this goes both ways. And chemistry is one of those, it's more of an art than it is a science to kind of peg, is there chemistry? Does it actually exist in this situation? I always like to ask the question, how do you actually test chemistry? I don't know if you can. It does kind of come back to a gut feeling. And for me, the question I've always asked, I would encourage you to ask the same question, simply this is, could I possibly go on a vacation or could I share a hotel room with that person for 2 days and not have them actually absolutely drive me nuts? If I say, yeah, I don't know if I could do that, I wouldn't hire him. There's not the chemistry that you're hoping to actually have there. 3 is character. I think character kind of speaks for itself. Lack of integrity at any level doesn't bypass their ability or their competency level. And so just because they may be extremely competent, they have the ability, they have the gifting that you're looking for to fulfill the role. If they are a person that lacks integrity, if the character components aren't there, don't sacrifice yourself for them. It's better to just hit pause, be patient, wait for that right person to show up. And then lastly, culture. They may have all the other components. You may really like them. They may be competent for the position. They're a person of great character, but they don't fit the culture of the organization. They may not actually fit the culture of your church. And so you want to make sure that you pay attention to those 4 C's very, very particularly when it comes to hiring. And what is helpful is just spend time thinking, spend time planning, write down the kind of staff culture that you actually want to create. I think that's one of the things that oftentimes gets bypassed is we don't give enough time and effort in actually thinking through what am I building towards? What kind of people do I want to surround myself with? What kind of people do I want our church to look at and go, boy, I want to be like that person someday. And so keep those things in mind as you're developing the culture. Number 2, the second rule to staffing is I would encourage you to develop a compensation philosophy early on. So really spend a little bit of time. A philosophy of compensation always needs to come before the policy itself is written. In other words, is how do we want to treat our staff? What do we want to give them from a benefit standpoint? What do we want and hope? What do we pray that their experience would be at our church? So for me, one of the things that I've always kind of held to that kind of begins to be the foundation to our compensation philosophy is that my hope and my desire is that no matter how long that they actually serve on our team, that I hope that they would look back at our church situation, as their staffing opportunity, as a positive thing in their life. And not just from hey, boy, we really got along. I want them to see that God's hand was working in their life and particularly developing them into a better person, and that the rest of us as a staff team were there to support what God was actually wanting to do in their life. Whether or not it was always fun or whether or not there were some hard challenges that needed to take place. But my prayer and my desire is that they would look favorably in that season down the road and realize that we really, really cared and we desired for them to grow into being all that God actually desired for them to be. And so that serves as kind of the foundation. And then it's kind of, you begin to reverse engineer it. So if that's where we want to be, what will actually allow us to become that type of person? And we've written down value statements for specifically our leadership team and the way that we want to operate together. For instance, one of them is that we're going to choose to take the hill, but we're going to choose to take it together, meaning we don't want siloed ministries. We don't want to be compartmentalized in the way that we look at church and the way that we do ministry. We want to be all about the same thing and keeping the main thing the main thing. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be incredible things that are going to take place in youth ministry or really cool things taking place in children's ministry, and you can fill in the gaps. But the reality is that the way that we're all clicking together, we want to move in the same direction in order to kind of really have the greatest impact that we feel like God is calling us towards. Number 3, in smaller church situations, this is very important. You want to hire generalists early. Those that are part of the church staff in the early stages, and this is very specific, true to newer churches, younger churches, church plants. You need to have those staff members be extremely flexible, meaning that they have the bandwidth to oversee multiple ministries and projects. This is what I mean by hire generalists early. Later on, you can actually get to the conversation and the opportunity to hire specialists. For instance, you may get to a certain size of a church and you realize, boy, Joe over here is doing care for our widows. He's handling the food bank. He's overseeing the parking team. He's teaching youth. He's leading worship. We probably need to take something off his plate. And that's where you kind of begin to specialize. You look for that person that, boy, they've got the experience. They have the heart to just be focused in small group ministry, for instance. And so don't go too quickly to the specialist pocket. I want to encourage you to hire generalists early. By the time your church gets to, say, 700 to 800, you're probably now beginning to think about certain specialists that might fit the mold. And I do think that there's an ebb and flow to this, that there'll be seasons you hire specialists and then there'll be some seasons where you go back to hire generalists. But hopefully that'll be a helpful rule for you. Moving on, rule number 4. Volunteers are worth every cent. Every cent. Why? Because they're free. So spend more time thinking and praying and developing those that God's placed in your hands that are willing to work with just blood, sweat, and tears. Your volunteers are priceless, and you need to treat them as such. Honor your volunteers. Make them know that they're an integral part of what you're wanting to accomplish. If you hire too many people, you actually take away the opportunity for your volunteers to serve in very meaningful opportunities in the life of your church. And so I would encourage you, never go beyond 50% of your overall budget into staffing. If you can lower that, I think that's fantastic, but that will leave you room to make sure that you have a healthy balance to the way that you're actually going and you're hiring, and you're leaving ample room for volunteers to be able to step up and have meaningful time in the way that they volunteer in the life of the church. Number 5, don't overstaff. Don't overstaff. Overstaffing will create so many problems for you. You're going to wrestle with budget strain. There's going to be less opportunities for volunteers, just like what we talked about. And as a result, it can create a negative impact when staff transition out. And so you want to make sure that you're budgeting accordingly and not overstaffing in predicting growth is going to happen. I wish that we could all say that, boy, if I hire these 10 guys, we're going to grow by 1,000 people. That's not always the case. It's very rarely is the case. And so make sure that you budget, hold to your budget, don't overstaff, because that will could really hamper the impact and the efficiency by which you do it. Number 6, hire people that you can fire. Count the cost. And put some hiring safeguards in place to help you double check each hiring decision. When I say hire people you can fire, it's really, really hard to fire your best friend. It's really, really hard to fire your mom or your brother or your sister-in-law. And so pay attention to the people that you're hiring and put on your team. You want to make sure that if you did need to part ways, that there's not this massive repercussion as a result of that. I would even say so much so, I would be very, very careful of hiring the spouse of a board member, hiring the spouse of an elder. Because what happens if you need to dismiss that person from your staff because of something that they've been doing, or they just haven't been holding their own and fulfilling the job duties? And now you have somebody that's on your board that's directly related to them, and that can become problematic when it comes to just the chemistry within the board itself. And so make sure you really process, think through, double check all the safeguards when it comes to what are you comfortable with dealing with, and what are you not comfortable with dealing with. Rule number 7, don't hurry. Don't rush the process. Remember that challenging moments are moments creativity is birthed. So again, you may come back to that situation and go, boy, we have this problem. I wish we could just hire this person. And you may try to do everything you possibly can. You may even go out and fundraise to try to raise the money for that. That may not necessarily be the thing that God is calling you to do. Maybe he's actually calling you to figure out a different way of doing things based on your current team, based on the current level of volunteers you have. And so even though you face a challenging moment, don't rush to actually fill that spot with a staff member, a paid person. There may be something more creative and innovative that God is trying to get you to think of and actually begin to do. Number 8, hire where you need accountability. Few areas are so crucial to the mission that if you don't get done on time and with quality, the whole ministry is going to suffer. So hire people where you need the most accountability. And what I found is what that may mean is where you have a large team of volunteers, you probably need to hire somebody to actually oversee those volunteers and develop those volunteers. I've also found that it's very, very difficult to raise up volunteers to just handle administrative tasks. Why? Because they want to see some level of fruit of the mission connected to what they're doing and the time that they're donating to the church. And so as a result, can you find administrative help and volunteers? Yes, but it is more difficult and it's harder to find. And so those may be positions kind of as this that you just need to hire, because what they do is critical to the mission and helping things get done on time and with a certain level of quality. Number 9, you want to keep your hirings balanced. Don't just hire to get an immediate task completed. You want to keep the entire picture, the big picture, in mind about who you are, how you're currently operating, where you're going. I like to put it this way. If you have a piece of paper, just draw a line down the middle and put in on one side and out on the other. There are certain staff positions in your church that are going to help bring in income and people, right? So when you hire a youth pastor, for instance, there's an expectation that the youth group's going to grow, and those youth are connected to families and the parents, and that those parents hopefully will be able to begin to connect with our church. And as a result, money will come in. And so there are certain hires that you will make, certain positions that are going to bring more people, more resources as a result. At the same time, there are certain very needed positions that you're going to hire that aren't going to do that, but you still need those positions. And so when you look at that from an expense point, you're not expecting this to be an investment where you're going to get a return on that investment. You're actually putting this cost into just kind of, this is what it cost us to do business. And so hiring a bookkeeper, for instance, hiring HR, hiring different, those type of positions are more about money is going out, because they're not necessarily doing things that are going to help bring specific people in or increase the investments that are coming into the church, the organization. So you want to kind of pay attention to how many do we have on the inside, how many do we have on the outside. You don't want more on the outside than the inside. You want to make sure you kind of find a good, healthy balance to how those two can kind of coordinate together in the life of the church and how you're beginning to staff. Here's the way I think about it, and it's been helpful for me, is when the administrative staff, those on the out, are asking for more help, but they're not overwhelmed. The ministry tasks are still getting done. I've kind of realized I'm in my sweet spot. If I never hear from them and they feel like everything is just perfect and that they have enough people to handle the task, we may be overly staffed in that area. So that's just a helpful tip to kind of think about it. But there's 9 rules, and let's get to the 10th rule, and this is so important. Don't neglect God in the process. Think about this. God is more invested in your church than you will ever be. And so when you need that right person, the right hire, just trust the fact that God would lead you to that person, and that as you lead and you get better at clarifying the vision and clarifying the future, that God will take care of those needs and people will rally behind you in that process. 10 rules to helping you staff. I love to hear a little bit of your feedback. Let me know what was most helpful out of those 10 rules. Be smart, enjoy the process, and let's see what God does.